Namaste and welcome viewers to another brand new episode of Mirror Prime. I'm Ashish Pareek. India's journey into the digital era has been nothing short of revolutionary. In just a decade, we've seen a massive transformation. It takes just a tap for us to send any amount of money, just a few minutes to get any item home delivered. And all this has powered us into the fastest growing digital economy on the planet. But this growth, viewers, also has a darker side. Cybersecurity experts are raising alarms about a new wave of threats that we cannot ignore. According to a report by an NGO named PRAHAR, cyber attacks are surging at unprecedented levels. In fact, this data shows that India could face nearly 1 trillion cyber attacks every single year by 2033. And by the time India turns 100 in 2047, that number could soar to a mind boggling 17 trillion attacks, 17 trillion cyber attacks every single year. Now, Prahar's report also says that India faced 79 million cyber attacks in 2023 alone. In fact, we have managed to clock over 500 million cyber attacks in just the first 3 months of 2024 alone. Very scary data, very alarming data, and this again quantifies the cyber threat that India is facing today. Joining us right now is Abhay Mishra, who's the president of the NGO Prahar, which actually has published this data. Abhayji, appreciate you joining us on the broadcast. Now, the data that you put out is extremely worrying. You say India can face nearly 1 trillion cyber attacks every single year by 2033. How did you arrive at this data?
You see, it's all a reported data that in 2023, 97 million cyber crimes were reported. It is a documented data. It is a reported data. And in the beginning of 2024, just in the 3 months, this is again a reported data. We have 500 million cyber attacks which were blocked. They were reported and they were blocked. There is nothing new that we have said. We have just extrapolated it. If you go by the simple mathematics, you will notice that it is increasing at the rate of 200%. So with that thing, 500 million in 3 months means 2 billion in 1 year. So it is increasing at the rate of 200%. So if you calculate it similarly by 2032-33, it turns out to be 1 trillion. So similarly, we said that if it goes unchecked, if we do not take some extra measures to prevent all of this, then by 2047, it could touch 17 trillion. So that's how we arrive at the figures. Most of the data here is reported is there in the media, is there in the government documents. So that's how we arrived at the 70 trillion. If it goes like this, if it is not checked.
Well, stunning data this, and of course very alarming as well. In fact, your report, one of the things that I noted is that your report calls for all the cyber security related issues to be covered under one ministry. And this is interesting because I recently saw a government notification about how cyber related issues have been distributed between the telecom ministry, the IT ministry, and the home ministry. Do you feel that this has to stop and we should all have all of these issues covered under a special standalone agency which is only meant for cybersecurity and cyber crimes?
Yeah, we certainly believe that if it is distributed among the ministries, then the job is, job gets far more difficult to handle. What is the need of the hour is that we should have we have a super, we should have a super, cyber security cop. Just a sec, I have to decline this call. Right. So the need of the hour is to have a unified system, one ministry, and a centralized cyber security defense mechanism, because that is the need of the hour. That is what the research says, that it is growing at such a pace that in order to handle it, combat it, you need to have a dedicated full-time security experts of your own. Currently, what is happening? Governments are making enough efforts. So there is nothing wrong in that. Every state has its own cybersecurity cell system. So a lot of coordinated efforts are needed. This is on that our experts, in that research recommended that it should be a one unified way of fighting this menace of cyber threats. So that's how we feel that it should be one ministry, then it is better. It is always effective and very easy to control.
Absolutely, makes total sense. What you're trying to say, because you are, of course, saying that the government is trying to do a lot and different ministries are putting in efforts, but there's no concerted effort as well. And this is, of course, a factor that we can understand. Meanwhile, talking of your report now, it also highlights how betting apps can also turn into potent threats and how cybercrime can even become a tool for regime change. You are saying cybercrimes can be used to change governments. Could you elaborate on that?
See, let me first tell you that we meant to say that it's illegal betting apps. You know, although we are in the middle of some other study wherein we are trying to understand what are the ways and means to understand what is legal and what is illegal. And we have found that most of the people do not understand what is legal and illegal so far as these digital platforms are concerned. I'm not only talking about betting apps, I'm talking about every and all types of digital media platforms wherein people, a kid, a youth, or even an adult has no mechanism to identify what is legal and illegal. This is what is coming out in the new study that we have, we are conducting, we are in the middle of conducting it. But certainly we believe and we found that, like what happened in Bangladesh, it's a new way of intrusion. The old way of intrusion was that a terrorist used to send a gang of terrorists and go there and attack the territory and cause the damage. Now, what is happening? What has happened in Bangladesh? Our intelligence officers, our intelligence and people concerned across the globe believe that it was a orchestrated unified, war against that thing, wherein over a night the entire youth community of that, it was not even the opposition, the entire youth of that country stood up against their own government, and they toppled the government. So here we believe that it is there's a lot which can happen over these illegal apps. So illegal act is the question. The government has to certainly create some mechanism wherein people can identify what is legal and what is illegal. So as a solution, we have recommended that banning the apps or blocking the apps is not a solution. Government should start whitelisting the app, all types of app, be it any kind of app. So, but since in the betting apps and the gambling apps or whatever you use it, a lot of money is involved. Prime Minister Modi has just talked about cyber arrest, and one businessman from Punjab, a senior businessman was duped of 7 crore rupees. So where does this money will go? What is the reason for us to not believe that this money will be, invested back into funding terrorist activities and anti-national activities? So a lot can happen over these illegal betting apps or the gambling apps. So our recommendation is that the government should start whitelisting the apps.
Well, of course, it's interesting that you talk about digital arrests and we also need to understand that these issues don't just affect individuals or organizations. These can cripple an entire sector because we're all looking at what's happening as far as the aviation sector is concerned. The recent hoax threats against airlines have exposed the gaps in India's fight against cybercrime. Why do you think we are unable to trace and stop all these threats despite our technological advancements?
See, I think this question has been pretty well answered in the first or second question as an answer. I have said it that a lot needs to be done in the cyber security defense mechanism. Every citizen, every officer, every investigative agency needs to be trained, highly trained on these cyber security threats. So that's why we recommended that there should be a one unified ministry which handles it like we have a CBI and RAW. So why not a dedicated cyber security department managed by Government of India? Here, the government is doing whatever they can do in their capacity, but they are heavily relying on the outside private cybersecurity experts. Whereas the need of the hour is that you should have your own cybersecurity experts sitting in every office, every police headquarters, everywhere. And immediately, once the hoax call is done, people should get into action. All the unified coordinated efforts should be made to identify those hoax callers That's why I say another reason why we demanded the whitelisting of the apps, because ultimately these calls are administered through some app or the other. So if the government has information about what are the whitelisted apps, it will be easy for the government to identify the illegal apps. Government, when I say government, for the administrative authorities, for the law enforcement agencies, so they can easily reach out to the illegal apps and start the investigations out there. So that's however, if the problem is huge, there is no immediate quick fix solutions to anything. What we will have to train ourselves, we will have to prepare ourselves, for this huge cyber security threat that is being exhibited, that has been brought out by this report. That's the purpose of this report. That this much of threat, this much of cyber attacks we are anticipating in the coming years and coming times. So accordingly, we will have to gear ourselves to combat these threats. So whitelisting of the apps is one of the solutions that can be a workable solution.
All right. Abhayji, appreciate you joining us on the broadcast. Of course, sharing details of your report there, which has, of course, created a lot of storm and a lot of people are talking about it. And we'll be discussing this in detail, trying to take the conversation to a broader aspect, or trying to understand more in terms of what's happening across the nation. And joining us right now on the broadcast to help us understand more, help us decipher this data, and also give a sense of the cyber infrastructure and the cyber security situation in India. Pavan Duggal, cyber security expert, and Shri Partha Sarthi, who's also a renowned technology expert. Gentlemen, appreciate you for joining us on the broadcast. Pavanji, I'll start with you now. I'll get into the details of this report later, but we've heard of online dating scams in India. We've heard of OTP scams. Then came ransomware. And now even digital arrest, which the Prime Minister is also talking about. From individuals to companies to national agencies, nobody is spared as far as cybersecurity issues are concerned. I don't think I'd be overstepping if I say that cybercrime is probably the fastest growing national security threat.
There is no denying the fact that with the coming of COVID-19, we have actually now entered into a new era. There is the golden age of cybercrime has already commenced. And this golden age on cybercrime will continue to be with us for the next many decades. Therefore, as the world has entered into a new cyber world order, it becomes of crucial necessity that people understand some existing changed ground reality rules. Number one, cybercrime will be our daily companion for the rest of our lives. Number two, cybersecurity breaches will be the new normal. Once we start adjusting to this kind of ground developments and realities, we will be in a much better objective position to understand how the tentacles of cybercrime has been growing with each passing day, month and year. Now, earlier we only used to hear about Jamtara. Then we started to hear about Nu. Then you have now a number of other centers who are vying for attention. But what's happened is that we have seen the cottage industrialization of cybercrime as a phenomenon. More and more people in rural areas, semi-urban areas, small cities are turning on to cybercrime as a cottage industry. Why? Because they see some massive potential to earn huge quick bucks of money, and they also are cognizant of the fact that Indian cybercrime conviction ratio is very poor at less than 0.1%. So therefore, they somehow get the impression that, look, because India doesn't have dedicated cybercrime laws, our cybercrime conviction ratio is very low, they can go ahead and engage with impunity all kinds of cybercriminal activities, and somehow they all believe in the Indian Jugaad school of management. They believe that they will be able to do Jugaad. Should they be booked or should they be prosecuted and come out of any potential prosecution? So that's the reason why we are seeing a huge quantum jump in cybercrimes, and now cybercriminals are getting more intelligent. They want to work smart. Therefore, they have started using artificial intelligence for doing less, earning more. So the new paradigms of new cybercrime avatars, whether it's the digital arrest, whether it's cyber fraud, whether it's deepfake, are nothing but a manifestation in this particular regard. And therefore, the quicker India as a nation comes up with effective legal frameworks to deal with the menace of cybercrime, the better it will be.
Absolutely, Pawanji. It's almost scary when you say that cybercrime industry is almost more organized than a lot of other sectors in India. And again, this is something that the agencies really need to realize. Shri Parthasarthi, I'll take this point across to you. The fact that cybercrime is now becoming a growing menace that needs to be countered at the earliest, because I can't sit here and say the government is not doing anything. We're of course doing a lot, but it's just not enough. On one hand, we pride ourselves for being the fastest growing digital economy, but on the other hand, these things happen as well, and these also need to be paid attention.
Sure, Ashish. I think just taking off from what Dr. Duggal said, I think this is a very fast-growing economy. And I think in India, the challenge is that we are trying to tackle a big menace as with single arm combat. And I think we do not have a concerted effort in terms of fighting this particular, I would call it cyber terror, right? And the reason I call that is because it affects nation states, it affects critical infrastructure, it affects corporate, government, and individual citizens. So, and essentially it can come anywhere from whether it's coming from global or whether it's coming from domestic. On the domestic front, as Dr. Duggal said, it's a nice cottage industry, which essentially is picking up, which is picking up steam. And I think the types, techniques, other things are starting to increase because what is also happening is the threat surface itself is increasing. IT, OT, mobile, everything being online, your smart cities, whatever it is, we are wanting to give everything online. So we are exposing ourselves overall without putting the right checks and balances in place. So I think the key thing that needs to be looked at, I wouldn't say it's just the thing of the government alone. I think every time something like this happens, we just talk about government. I think it should be a government and public-private partnership which actually needs to work. If we are essentially what you call the Silicon Valley of the world, we also in the cyber this thing have to essentially put our arms together on this particular thing to see how we can effectively thwart and fight this because this has the ability to uh, completely collapse that particular industry that we are basically operating on. And it also has this thing to critically cripple our entire country. So from that aspect, I think what needs to be done, I think the previous speaker on your previous show was talking about government needing to have command and control. Government already has several things which is in terms of command and control. I think the areas that they need to really start pushing forward, which they had as an idea and a thought, which was working together, was related to the sectoral certs. How different industries, because different industries have different challenges, how the sectoral certs have to be operating very, very critically. Second is how do companies and how do governments come together? Today, the problem in India is this. If I get attacked, then I'm actually watching, waiting and watching to see, hey, I got attacked or I did not get attacked, but there was a threat which I basically took care of, but I will not report it. And then I will watch, right? But in some of the more developed countries, there is a method of people actually sharing without actually without needing to provide too much information. They provide specific, but then there are specific rules and regulations where the entire industry and sector come together and they are fighting that entire battle together. And which is where I said one arm combat will not work. We have to have command and control. We need to have public private partnership and we need to bring the industry together and ultimately all of these together need to protect the end citizen because the citizen is availing services from the government and these particular private sector enterprises.
Absolutely. A very interesting point that you made there, and I want to pick up on that and take that question across to Pavan Duggalji. Mr. Pavan, Mr. Parthasarthi here clearly says that the government is doing what it can, but the problem is they're punching in all directions. There's no concerted effort. And I was looking at this notification that, of course, the report was also pointing at the fact that specific responsibilities have been assigned to different ministries. For example, the telecom department is responsible for the telecom network security. The IT department takes care of cyber security, and the home ministry handles cybercrime. Do you think all these issues should be handled by a single nodal agency? That will make this entire challenge much more easier to deal with because one agency will be able to focus more than actually distributing all these efforts across multiple ministries.
A couple of years back, I mooted the idea that India requires a dedicated cybersecurity ministry. Now, that idea was a bit early in its time, and therefore there was no biting the bullet. But the fact still remains is now cybersecurity is across the ecosystem. So trying to say that a particular agency or a ministry will only deal with a particular aspect of cybersecurity is going to be not a very conducive exercise, because cybersecurity permeates across sectors, permeates across zones, across industries, across paradigms. So the quicker you have a uniform approach to cybersecurity, that's better. Well, at least the government needs to be complimented that from the earlier vision or the earlier position, well, almost every ministry was saying that cybersecurity is my baby. Now it's just been narrowed down to three, which is for cybercrimes, it's the Ministry of Home Affairs; for general cybersecurity, it's the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology; and for telecom cybersecurity, it is the Department of Telecommunications. But I think if you still start going granularly down, then you start realizing whether it's aviation cybersecurity, whether it's medical ecosystem cybersecurity, whether it's IoT cybersecurity, whether it's artificial intelligence cybersecurity, they are all going to present you immense amount of new challenges. Does that mean we will start coming up with different ministries, again looking at different aspects of cybersecurity? A much more homogenized, holistic and better approach for India will be that India comes with a dedicated, comprehensive ministry on cybersecurity, where all aspects of cybersecurity across all paradigms need to be effectively overlooked, overseen, supervised, managed, and of course directed by this central approach. Otherwise, it's going to be a classical case of five blind men trying to describe an elephant. There's bound to be diversity in approaches, in perspectives. If different ministries will deal with cybersecurity, that could ultimately have a long-term impact upon the sovereignty, security and integrity of India, apart from prejudicially impacting some of India's cyber sovereign interests in cyberspace and also the internet at large. So a more holistic approach is required. Fortunately, the government is right now working on a national cybersecurity strategy, which is supposed to come up with a homogenized approach as to what needs to be adopted on cybersecurity by all stakeholders, whether governmental or private or ecosystem otherwise. But the fact remains is that we will have to join all dots. We'll have to carry everybody together, because cybersecurity is not a governmental preserve. A large number of critical information infrastructure is in the hands of the private sector, and therefore cybersecurity of India's crown jewels, which are in the hands of the private sector, would assume even more significance. Therefore, joining in the private sector along with governmental efforts at protecting and preserving cybersecurity could be a great starting point, apart from generating more capacity building and awareness about cybersecurity, about the need for adopting cybersecurity as a way of life and as a living culture by all digital stakeholders as we go forward, and the need for creating more awareness, more education in this regard.
Absolutely. It's all about uniting forces and not dividing them. I think that should be the strategy. Partha, and just a couple of minutes left on the broadcast before we wrap. Any golden advice for our viewers, because we keep talking about digital hygiene, the things, the do's and the don'ts as far as internet and the digital era is concerned, but we still see issues like digital arrests also come to the fore. So before we wrap, any advice for the people who are watching right now?
Yeah, I think, Ashish, if we are coming to the problem or the challenge when the incident has occurred, then I think it is a little too late. I think similar to when you look at physical defenses, what do? You primarily are building your defenses, but then you're also fortifying your structures. You're building a lot of things which you need to control ahead of time, and which is going to be important. I think in terms of any products, any software, anything that is being rolled out, and I think the simple aspect has to be there has to be a significant and strong cybersecurity framework. There has to be policies that have to be enforced, and there has to be strict compliance to that. Software coding testing that needs to be done, product testing that needs to be done before they are basically rolled out. All of these essentially I would call are the first lines of defense that you really need to build. After which, once you basically build that part of it where you have a full proper governing framework, and then you're putting all of these particular things in terms of what you call a security by design, privacy by design, resilience by design, and embedding it within the infrastructure that you're building out. Next is essentially how do you do effective threat management? Threat management and today the word terminology being used is exposure management. Once you have the cyber infrastructure, what is the exposure that you're sitting on? Constantly, you need to basically monitor that particular
Absolutely.
exposure. And the last is essentially the cyber defense and how strong is your cyber defense. And I think all of these need to come together and not only coordinated for an organization, but they need to be coordinated for the nation, coordinated for critical infrastructure. And I think the person who's most affected in a lot of these things, who does not have too much to
Absolutely. Partha
control,
Sartaji, I'll
is
have
the
to
end
interject you
citizen.
there. We're running short of time, but of course, very critical advice there that you're giving our viewers right now about how to stay safe. And like you rightly pointed out, it's all about uniting forces and not dividing them. And of course, the industry is of the opinion that there needs to be a cyber security nodal agency to ensure that all these threats are fought with full force. Really appreciate you joining us right now. Mr. Pavan Duggal and Shri Partha Sarthi will, of course, be coming back to you for more on that. All right, viewers, on that note, it's a wrap on this edition of Mirror Prime. Lots more lined up on the other side. Stay tuned.